Hello and welcome to today's video where we're looking at Rule 19, Conduct of Vessels in Restricted Visibility. As always, we're going to look at the rule itself and apply the rule in a couple of different situations. So Rule 19, Conduct of Vessels in Restricted Visibility. Let's dive straight in with the first paragraph. This rule applies to vessels not in sight of one another when navigating in or near an area of restricted visibility. So this sentence is kind of obvious. It needs to be restricted visibility, which is defined in Rule 3, of course, but your own vessel doesn't need to be in it. If you're approaching another vessel which is in restricted visibility, Rule 19 will still apply. Paragraph B starts to talk about safe speed, which is actually covered in Rule 6, but paragraph B of Rule 19 reinforces it, and says you need to proceed at a safe speed adapted to restricted vis, and a power-driven vessel shall have her engines ready for immediate manoeuvre. So it's one of the few rules that actually directs you exactly what you've got to do with your engines. You need to be ready to manoeuvre immediately. Paragraph C, again, it's similar to paragraph B and just says you need to have due regard to restricted vis when complying with the rules of section 1. So not only are we talking about safe speed, but we're also talking about lookout, risk of collision, action to avoid collision, narrow channels, and traffic separation schemes. Then paragraph D, we're on to the actual action that we need to be taking. A vessel which detects by radar alone the presence of another vessel. So of course we're using radar because we can't see anything. You need to determine if a close quarter situation is developing and or if risk of collision exists. So it's not just risk of collision. If a close quarter situation is developing, this is what you need to do. You need to take avoiding action in ample time, provided that when such action consists of an alteration of course, so far as possible the following shall be avoided. So it's saying if you're going to alter course, you need to try and avoid this. It doesn't tell you you cannot reduce speed. Indeed, a speed alteration, a reduction in speed that is, might be the best course of action. But if you're going to alter course, you need to avoid the following. An alteration of course to port for a vessel forward of the beam, other than for a vessel being overtaken. So it basically means you've got to come to starboard for a vessel forward of the beam, unless you're overtaking them. And then the second part, an alteration of course towards a vessel abeam or abaft the beam. So if they're abaft your beam on your port side, you need to alter away to them round to starboard. Abaft the beam on the starboard side, you've got to alter away from them round to port. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this time we're going to be looking at a radar plot. Of course we can't do a normal situation because we cannot see the other vessel. It's all going to be on the radar screen. For ease of reference, I'm going to divide our screen into 4 sectors. Of course, everything forward of the beam is in the top 2 halves and everything abaft the beam is in the bottom 2 halves. Right, so what happens if we detect a target out on the starboard side? It's forward of the beam and it's out to starboard. We've got to make an alteration of course to starboard because we need to avoid an alteration of course to port for a vessel forward of the beam. Likewise, if it's out on the port side forward of the beam, getting closer still, we've got to alter our course to starboard because we need to avoid an alteration of course to port. And then if the target is astern of us, this time out on the port quarter, again we'd alter away from it because we need to avoid an alteration of course towards it. So we alter to starboard again. And then the final quarter, out on the starboard quarter, if it's getting closer to us, we need to alter away from it. So this time we're going to come round to port. So this is the only one where we actually come to port. The rest of them we need to come to starboard. So we can have a look at all these together. Wherever the target is, unless it's out behind the beam on the starboard side, we need to alter our course to starboard. And if it's on our starboard quarter, we need to alter our course to port. Of course, the exception is if we're overtaking. So all this implies we have to do a radar plot, we need to determine everything, and if that tells us we are overtaking the vessel, then we're allowed to come to port for it if it's forward of the beam. So paragraph D has basically covered the action we need to take depending on where we detect the radar target. Paragraph E then goes on to say, except where it's determined that risk of collision does not exist. So the only way we could have determined that is if we've done a radar plot. Every vessel which hears apparently forward of her beam a fog signal of another vessel. So if you hear a fog signal And remember the ranges that we're talking about here. We're talking the very largest ships only have a range of 2 miles, and if they're sounding that signal once every minute, then it could have been a good amount of time and a good amount of distance between their last signal when you first hear them. They could be well under 2 miles from you, and we're talking very large ships. Or, if you cannot avoid a close quarters situation with another vessel forward of the beam, then you need to reduce your speed to the minimum at which you can keep on your course. But you shall, if necessary, take all your way off, and in any event navigate with extreme caution until danger of collision is over. So it says, first of all, reduce your speed to the minimum you can keep your course, and then, if necessary, stop. Don't just stop straight away. You still need to be able to keep on your course, and you still need to be able to make those alterations. And it's only then that, if it's necessary, you take all way off. But you've always got to navigate with extreme caution until danger of collision is over. And that brings us to the end of Rule 19. Hopefully you found this information useful. I think obviously we're going to be looking at radar plotting at some point, and that would help us with Rule 19. For now, of course, we've just looked at where the targets are. We've seen they're getting closer to the centre, risk of collision exists, so we've got to make the alteration. But a radar plot would actually explain that situation fully. As I say, I hope you found the information in this video useful. If you have, a thumbs up is always appreciated. Any questions, just leave them in the comments below. And until next time, thank you for watching, and goodbye.